Hello and welcome to another episode of Fikava Vet Chat. We talk for quite a while about the One Health philosophy, and usually it is so that veterinary medicine is taken second place behind human medicine, so that we do a few things, but usually we look up to our human medicine colleagues. In this case, and in this episode, I would call it possibly a One Health Plus, because today we talk about one area where we have, I think, the heads up on our human colleagues. What I'm talking about is our approach to the COVID pandemic. Veterinary surgeons have been involved in the research of the pandemic, the control of the pandemic, and also in the production of the vaccines. However, we have one further tool in our arsenal that our human colleagues possibly don't have. And these are our canine patients, or just the canine species we are dealing with, which is just a little bit better than we are to sniff out somebody who has a COVID virus infection. And to talk about it, I have no one less than the head of the small animal clinic of Hanover Veterinary School, Holger Volk. Hello and good evening, Holger, to join us for this episode.
Hello, it's really great that we finally speak, and I'm really looking forward. As I said before, I really would love to talk some German English, so I'm sure a lot of people are just enjoying this episode to the best.
Yes, yeah. You see, there's one, I think we should explain it. So the first thing is, and whoever is listening to this or watching this, I'm afraid you have to endure two Germans speaking English. And for the two Germans speaking English, where it's pretty clear that we are not native German. Now, well, Holger is getting very close. I will never
Getting closer.
But then, well, that's my background. It's just the way it is. Anyway, so but we have more in common, I think, than just being vets. You are at Hanover Vet School. That was where I studied. Did you study also in Hanover?
Yeah, I did study.
Okay, good. A few years after me, I would assume.
And then, also.
And then we also both spent a fair amount of time in the UK. Actually, sort of still are, and we both sort of like to go over there. But we also both are a little bit Brexit damaged, I think. So one way or the other, I would say. Mm-hmm. How long did you live in the UK?
Oh, it was nearly 15 years. So I did study, obviously in Hanover like you did. And then I had 1 year of exchange in Lyon, which was a fabulous year. And then when I finished, in Germany, people have to be very organized, very structured. And then, when you want to make a career, you have to plan your life till the end. So at that time point, I thought about doing research. And so I did epilepsy research. And did my PhD with Wolfgang Löscher, which was an absolutely great experience. Was one of the first PhD students in Hanover. And
that's by the way, Wolfgang Löscher is the biochemistry professor, or was a professor in biochemistry.
Pharmacology.
Pharmacology. Oh, okay, pharmacology.
Yeah, and
so for the people who speak German, he had also the nickname Auslöscher.
Exactly. Yeah,
he was quite hard in his exams.
Yeah, I mean, Wolfgang Löscher is probably one of the smartest people I've met in my life. Yeah. When you work with him, he's quite an inspiring individual, but he's also strict and can be, saying this, I think he was always very kind to me and definitely has helped me a lot in my career. I will never forget, a couple of the times I spent with him, and one, I had a chat with him about some findings I had during my PhD, and he said, "Oh, wait, there's a paper And then he just goes to his little cabinet and he pulled this one paper out. And, and he did this so many times. You think like, oh my gosh, this guy has such a memory. And he is one of the top cited people in the world. So he is, when we talk about One Health, he has done amazing work for veterinary patients. He was behind the whole imipitoin Paxion story. So he because of him, actually, the molecule got developed for veterinary medicine because he was the first patent holder. And but he also is one of a kind in epilepsy research in human field. So yeah, but by saying this, that unfortunately that was still not enough for me, and I didn't want to only deal with rodents my whole life. And so I wanted to, look after pets. That's why I started veterinary medicine. I do love owners and I do love pets. I know I'm quite unique in this, but I do love people. And so I went to the Royal Vet College, and David Church at that time gave me the chance. It was a great ride. So I started from a dishwasher to the millionaire. Perhaps I was not the millionaire, but I was the intern. Had a really rough ride in the beginning, I would say, because as you know, the veterinary education in Germany was not probably at the same standard as the UK veterinary education in the last year, especially in the clinical years. But then I think my PhD helped me. My academic side was very well developed, and at the end, I left as a head of department for all the clinical services.
Well, it's
After all
something
the
that
hospitals,
I think that the lack of knowledge, I think we sometimes, that's my own impression, sort of was we tend to make up. I mean, there's a little bit of our German gene, I would say, possibly with accuracy, and we have a sort of, we usually see that we have a working plan, we are organized.
we definitely are.
And that can be advantage. I mean, I found that very often sort of with my team or with my clients also. I was certainly not sort of the sharpest vet around, but I was organized. People knew exactly what they get with me, and I communicated well. And I said to a lot of clients, sorry, that's beyond that what I know or what I can or what I understand. But really smart colleague around the corner,
Yeah.
and I send you to him or I send you to her, and I'm very happy then once she or he has seen your dog that I continue with the treatment. But I think we and then have continuity, have good communication with the referral place, and then people, as long as they understand what you are doing,
oh, it's fine.
it's absolutely no problem.
It actually adds to trust, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah. Mm. Well, Sue, neurology, obviously that's sort of your main thing. So that came through did that start at the RBC, or did that already start at Hanover with your PhD?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, it probably started with, I always tell the story about Beauty, which was my own old Irish setter dog. And when I was a vet student in Lyon, she had, she started to have seizures. And I will never forget the moment where she had a generalized seizure in the little flat, which some nuclear plant powered electric heating. And the first thing I did after she had a generalized tonic-clonic seizures, I ran to my car and got my stethoscope, and then I listened to her heart. And I guess one of the things we all know is you can't stop a seizure with your stethoscope. But it was kind of one of those moments, which shape you, and you thought like, whoa, this is really frightening. And I was already a vet student, I already was in the clinical year, and Lyon had a really nice way of teaching, and that frightened me. And then when I had a couple of key moments in my life, I was a leadership student in Cornell University, and coming back home, then I thought about, where could I be a lab student, in which institute. And at that time there were three, and I did, the typical the typical US way that you look at the PubMed records. To be very honest, I was very dry and organized, like you would say. And Löscher was one of the people who had the best track record at the university. And then I will never forget, I went to his office and knocked on those double doors, which people had. They had those double doors, so it's very quiet inside. And he said yes, and I said, hey, I was just in Cornell, and they said it would be great to be a lab student when you're still a final year student. And he just looked at me, and he was very surprised about this idea. And I think at that time he thought I'm totally out of my mind. And but saying that, there was another person who was doing his habilitation, Ulrich Ebert, and he saw the chance, and then we did some really amazing work about neurogenesis in epilepsy, which at that time no one believed us. But a couple of years later, Nature papers happened. So not with me, unfortunately, but it was definitely a ride. And since then, actually, Löscher always had students in his lab, and I think he recruited some really bright minds from doing this, because it's a nice way of getting your toes into the water, diving a little bit deeper into the research field. And then after I finished, I did the PhD, and then obviously doing epilepsy research. When I applied at the RVC, I have to say they didn't want me. I always say an academic life is a life of rejection. It's
J.K. Rowling offered
yes,
her
100%.
Harry Potter novels to I don't
Yeah,
know how
exactly.
many publishers. So no shame in
No
asking. That
shame.
what counts. That's what I often also say to students, or even also to my kids. Knock on 10 doors. The 9 doors
Exactly.
that don't open, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Nobody
Exactly.
knows about it. There's just you and this the person who doesn't take you. So there's no shame in that. But that what counts is the one that opens it. And
Yeah,
then
and just to get up again, So I also applied in the US for internships, and I applied obviously in England. And at the end, I think that's why I mentioned David Church. He saw the potential in me, and got me over for doing an internship, and that was really great. At the end, it paid out. I think I definitely was very loyal, and I'm still loyal to the Royal Vet College. It's a great place to work. There are some amazing colleagues, and I have been very fortunate to have some amazing mentors. So one of the things I tried, I did a little bit of Chiari-like malformation, syringomyelia research and neuropathic pain, but epilepsy I could never really shake off. So I've been doing, a lot of work in epilepsy, nutrition. Now we do deep brain stimulation. We do all the stuff you can think of to improve drug-resistant epilepsy. But saying this, obviously now we are now branching out and doing learning research and cognitive type research and so on. But I do still miss the UK. It's very funny. I'm still sometimes sad. I loved working there. It's a great place to work as a vet, but I also have to say I'm really, really proud of being back home. Coming home, I think we can make a huge difference, actually. And there are some, the new generation there is amazing. There are some really bright minds. I think actually the people you get in the German system, very fortunate. I do miss the internationality, but we are changing this at the moment. So we get more folks from abroad. But saying this, I mean, TU is a great place to work. And actually, to be honest, it's probably a better place to do research. It's easier to do research, and there's more opportunity to do that. So that is, in a nutshell. But I'm not a person who wouldn't say I don't miss the places I've been. But
then come on, you can hardly find a town or a city in Germany that has a closer link to the UK than Hanover.
Exactly.
So and also in the position where you sit, I mean, this is an international environment, and so it's so easy to move sometime. Well, theoretically, it's easy.
Exactly.
Sort of now, okay, Brexit makes it a bit more difficult, but nevertheless, with academia, it's certainly easier to think international than, say, in private practice also.
100%. And you should come and visit, I mean, the place has changed. I don't know when you were last time there, but the clinic is second to none. I mean, the toys we have as a clinician is just fabulous. It's really great.
But today we want to narrow the nervous system down to the first cranial nerve, I would say. So we're just talking about the olfactory nerve because we want to talk about sort of dogs sniffing out somebody who has a COVID infection. So first of all, before we do that, I mean, I remember that I went to one lecture at BSAVA Congress, and the lecturer was talking about the vision of dogs. And he compared it with human vision. And sort of he said, okay, not an old dog, but a young dog, obviously not particularly good with sort of seeing color, but they apparently see light 6 times better than we do. So if we go out with a young dog sort of at night or at dusk, they probably see better contrast than we probably do. But then the sight is not the big thing. I mean, with cats, it's a completely different matter then, also with the position of the eyes and things like that. But in this case, smelling, how much better do they smell than we do?
Yeah,
any idea? Can you compare it?
I think one of the challenges as a human being, and it explains probably also how we came about to do this research. When we do research, as most scientists will do, I think we always take a very anthropocentric type of view. So we are, you have a human who has cognitive problems, and it's often memory of images and words, and so we try to replicate this in our animal models, so to speak. And I flipped that, and the reason actually why we started with this whole research, and then I answer your question, was because we got really interested in cognitive dysfunction. So dogs, which a dog which is age of 12, 1 in 3 is affected. Dogs which are 15 to 6, 2 out of 3 dogs are affected. But the one disease this has not been properly studied was epilepsy. So we started to do some work together. Rowena Packer was at that time my postdoc, and she did some great work, and that kind of started the whole process. And we found that dogs with epilepsy have a reduction in trainability and get signs of cognitive dysfunction, so like dementia, canine dementia, which I just mentioned earlier, right? And that was really interesting. And then, but if you also look at that type of questionnaires, it's often very anthropocentric, in my opinion. And so we thought, as you said, the dog will probably appreciate the environment in a very different way than we do. So we thought, could we test the sensing ability by the smell, and look at cognition from that point of view, and that's what we did. We looked at cognitive behavior, and how this integrates into scent. Yeah, I just realized my lights are turning off, so you have to be why ever.
We can still see you.
Why ever, probably my kids. But so we the plan was, when I also started in Hanover, obviously when you move as a professor, you get some opportunities which you wouldn't have otherwise, right? And financially, and so we established and built up a nice behavioral lab with my postdocs, Sebastian Meller and Friedrich Twele, and they and there we have had this device where you have different holes, 7 holes, and behind each hole you have 2 options, and you can look at couple of learning paradigms, and that's how we started. So we first looked, can we train dogs, and how do epileptic dogs behave? Do they have problems with certain types of memory? So we wanted to get more into detail there. And if you think about a dog, I think the best way to describe how good their sense of smell is that they can smell one drop of fluid in 20 Olympic pools. So it's an amazing amount, right? You can also do a comparison, like you say, we have like 5 million nerve cells, because it's not actually a nerve to be. Now I'm the neurologist, but it doesn't matter. But there are 5 million receptors we have, and dogs have 250 to 300 million. So we have a higher number. They have a bigger surface when they smell. The airflow through the nose is very different. So you have a lot of abilities they have, which we will not have. And I think then that becomes more interesting is they have also the vomonasal organ, the one which you have from your mouth upwards. And I do think that will, and I can't tell you yet 100%, but I do think that this plays also a role. At the moment, people think that you need to have a touch or to that, but I do think that dogs are able to recognize protein structures over that, like they can, pheromones can be detected over it. And I think as long they are in some form airborne, they can sense it not only by sniffing, but also probably by the vomonasal organ, which gives you kind of an extra boost in your smell behavior compared to us. And I think we have no clue what they really sense or not sense. And the interesting thing is, and this is not the first time in my career, has been couple of things, where we started something. So the first one I told you about the neurogenesis in epilepsy, because we found it in different areas of the brain people didn't think new neurons belong to. So that was a dogma, Then there was a dogma about the blood-brain barrier being something which there's a barrier and there's no drugs really can penetrate it, and that there's no active transporter. So we then looked at multi-drug transporters which actively pump lipophilic structures out. It was a total no-go. So it's another dogma which was turned over. Then we studied a lot about nutrition in epilepsy, and people said, oh, your results can't be true because it's just nutrition and it's not a drug. And, now other people are showing this. And the same is happening now with this COVID sensing stuff. Saying this, one of the things which is absolutely fascinating in the work we are doing at the moment, you feel like the whole science community is focusing on making a difference, which has been phenomenal. I mean, I know, and I'm COVID tired, like probably most people are, but it has been probably quite a short period of time, right? I mean, we got the vaccine developed in no time. And the same is happening now since we studied the first paper. I mean, so many groups, there are more than 25 countries in the world which are working on this now. And I always compare science with a picture from mosaic stones, right? And you find your little stone, but as long no one else finds some similar stones, it never adds up to a picture. And in this case, many groups around the world have found similar results. And yes, everyone always says, we are the first one, but at the end of the day, we published the first paper. Dominique Grandjean in Paris in Alfort, he's kind of the father of this type of work across the world, and probably the best network person. But we work very closely together, and it looks like there's a real momentum has gone. So I will never forget that we started end of March, beginning of April with that work. And at the beginning, we had very difficulties of getting samples from people who were infected. And then obviously we only compared them to controls, so meaning no SARS-CoV infection. And when we published the first one, it was already published in July, which is an unbelievable speed in scientific community. And since then, there are so many papers been published, and they all find very similar results. And I will never forget the moment where it was a Friday evening, and I called Albert Osterhaus, who is like a big guru in virology about coronavirus. He did his whole career about coronavirus and influenza. And he's now also at the THO. But is a vet virologist, is Dutch, but now he spends like his end of his career.
So you headhunted him, yeah?
Exactly, yeah, and exactly. And he thought I'm totally crazy, So I switch on my light again, hey. And then we had on the Friday evening, he thought like, oh yeah, this young professor, whatever, and whatever he says, how can dogs actually sniff stuff like that? And then the next morning we had another chat, and he was like, yeah, why not? So I really think Ab is an amazing guy, because he thinks a little bit outside the box as well. So he's not just, because when you tell people first, and especially I think human colleagues and scientists can be sometimes quite ignorant, or potentially even arrogant in some ways, to those types of new ideas. But now I think there's not a lot of people who have been in the matter who would doubt what we have been finding, because there's so many people who have found exactly the same. We could replicate our results. We have done some amazing new work where we also took cell cultures and infected them with different types of viruses. So different coronaviruses, different other respiratory viruses, but also SARS-CoV-1, MERS, and SARS-CoV-2, and the dogs were able to differentiate them. So it's not,
Wow.
yes, they, it's
but,
not 100% specific.
To butt a little bit in there, you mentioned getting the material. I mean, that must have been in the beginning, must have been so difficult. How did you manage that? Getting your hands on something. And then also, I mean, one thing is getting your hands on it, but then also not getting infected by it, or really, I mean, because you have also a duty of care to the people who are doing the research. You can't just sort of ask them to handle them, the material.
Fantastic comment. And I mean, you're totally spot on. And obviously, it's not only taking the material, which would be one thing. You can obviously ask people, but then also transporting it, because of the law, you're not allowed to just take it in your bag and travel across Europe, right? So that's where Ab Osterhaus was absolutely amazing. And also, he kind of is the Maren van Kerkwitz-Blikwede. She also leads that institute at the THO, and both of them have been absolutely stunning. So, but Ab said, a way to keep the smell would be to inactivate the samples. And we discussed a lot about, do we do this with heat? Do we do this with UV light? Or how do we do it? And he came up with the idea of using beta-propionolactone, which gave us the possibility to inactivate the samples. But at that moment of time, and we're talking, when you think about when the pandemic hit Europe, there was very little known. We didn't even know which cell line was the best to look at virulence, because obviously he has used the BPL inactivation for other viruses and other coronaviruses, but you have to prove then when we have at the THO a high security lab, but you still have to prove that you can take the sample out, right? And it's inactive. So you have to make sure that the virulence is not level is not obviously there, and so that had to be all established in an astonishing short period of time, and I'm really grateful to them. There was a postdoc called Claudia Schulz. She still works with us as well, and she did a lot of the monkey work there. And without them, it would have not been possible, because, as you said, you want to be sure that the folks you work with are safe, right? And the other one,
families
at that moment of time,
yes,
we didn't know, do the dogs get infected or not, right? So there was more than just the people, and also we used tracheobronchial, so saliva and tracheobronchial secretion, because the first patients we had were all intensive care patients. And obviously we had to get then controls from the same environment, because dogs are so good in their scenting. So they might have just smelled the hospital rather than the infection. So we had to take sure that you get obviously samples from the same people in the same environment, and all these other things you need to think about. And there, I've been very grateful to people at the university in Eppendorf,
complex, gosh,
and the medical school in Hanover. And actually, sorry to mention so many names, but I am really grateful. I mean, Professor Tobias Welte, he's a pneumologist, and Professor Manz is the head of the medical school, and they all played a part, and so it was without them it would have not been possible, because me as a vet, I can't just go to a medical school and say, hey, give me some samples.
It just shows, if our profession work together, what can be achieved, especially if we have a scenario like a pandemic.
100%. And to be honest, I think sorry to quote now David Church again, but he always said to me, if no one wants to take the credit, obviously he stole this quote too, but he always said that, he said, if no one wants to take the credit, mankind can achieve great things. And I think one of the things in the pandemic at that moment of time, and the people didn't think about, big scientific papers and stuff like that. They really thought about making a difference. And I think that's the whole reason why we started, right? Yeah.
So there you got the samples, then you do the testing, then results were very, 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 very promising.
Yeah, and obviously having a chat, obviously, we in the beginning, we had very limited number of samples. We used a different type of training technique, because we had this machine. So normally, traditionally, it takes a long time to train those dogs in the lineup or in the sand wheel or whatever. And by using the machine, you get a lot of repetitions, and they get obviously food samples, and the training was in a week.
One other question, sorry. The dogs, where did you get the dogs from? Who trains them? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story as well. So when I did my PhD, there's a veterinary behaviorist who worked at the TIHO, so Dr. Esther Schalke, and she ended up, 15 years later, when I called her again, ended up at the German Armed Forces, and they take great care in training the dog, and she is at the moment still, I think, the only diploma holder in veterinary behavior in Germany. So good on the German army. And so because of this connection from the past, I said, could you think it help? And then obviously she had to ask her. I learned a lot about the army structure in Germany as well. And we got them involved, and they thought it's a great idea and supported it not only in dog power, also in manpower and in financial terms, and helped us doing a lot of the research. And that was for us, a win-win situation, because I think for them it was great because they got a new insight, and that might be even being protective for their soldiers in the field one day. But also for us, it was great because we had experts in the field, and not only because as you might know, in the explosive world, and also in now with this, it's not only the dog, it's also the dog handler. So when you get a certificate, also get normally a certificate for both together, for the search behavior. And when we look at what we just did, we did now look at real life scenarios, and when we used them there, dogs were, they did perform well, but when a dog handler tried to interfere, they perform poorly. So you need to really have a good team, and that is really essential. And by this connection, we were able, obviously, to get this all done.
So there you are. So if you have your first results, it looks all very promising. That works quite well. And then who came up with this idea using the dogs sort of on the concerts? I mean, that's what's happening at the moment. Sort of, we had just to explain for our listeners and viewers, sort of, there are at the moment sort of a whole series of music events, sort of rock concerts and all sorts of music concerts. And the dogs are now tried on these events. So if people have to, I don't know, they have to test in advance, so ideally not to bring COVID in, but nevertheless, there's always a risk that one might slip through.
Yeah. So
And
I mean,
how did you, to start with, how did you manage to get hold of the Congress organizers and the concert organizers?
It's also a great story, to be honest. When, like I said, when we started, we really did this to make a difference, right? And we did a couple of studies. We did prove our results, and people said, can the dogs really do this? You have to prove it again. Then we proved it again. Then we found that it was not only saliva they could detect and differentiate, it was urine and sweat. So we were able to say, hey guys, you can actually differentiate it from all. There's like an ubiquitous smell on those individuals. And the interesting thing for that is that sweat, is, yes, sometimes potentially you can find a couple of viruses in there, but normally not, to be honest. And no one has shown that it's infectious. So a lot of people in the world have used actually sweat, and they never had a problem. And that's an important part of the story. But when we started this, we said, where can we use it now in the field? And then there were a couple of people interested. But I always believe that when this is used, it needs to be a little bit of a top-down approach, because what I didn't wanted to have happen is that anyone would start training their dogs and they use it on people, because they're especially if you have a German history, you don't want that dogs are used in a non-professional way, let's say this way, right? And sniff out people, and then suddenly they get pulled out. I know that in different countries, even in the UK, or when you go to New Zealand or US, you might get sniffed out and it's kind of accepted, but in Germany I think it's not the right image and not the right way forward. And so we approached a lot of the authorities, and there's a lot of dogs used, for sniffing money, weapons, explosives, and there was a lot of interest. But I have to say, to be honest, the middle management in these governmental structures were always kind of stopping it. And then Stefan Schreckenberger from Pro Event and Nico Röger from Holger Concert came to us and said, guys, we really have a big issue. We don't know how we can survive. Usually, Hannover Concert, they did 4 events a day. They did none, right? So they were really frustrated. And I said, guys, that might be the perfect opportunity to actually see how dogs behave in the field. And also in a concert, you have actually a relatively structured entrance phase, right? And so we approached Lower Saxony, the ministry, and pitched them our idea. And after many discussions, a little bit, one has to say it would have been nicer to be earlier, because we started the whole process in the beginning of the year, and then obviously we just are now doing the concerts. And in the beginning of the year, I think we could have made a bigger difference, but they did fund a study, and we are really grateful for that, because it's the first of its kind where we have a parallel of antigen test, PCRs, and the dog knows. And we are comparing different types of search behaviors. We have a lineup, we have we do single samples or pooled samples, and see how good the dog is. One has to say that we have a very high vaccination rate, even whatever government tells you, but the people who come to the studies are highly vaccinated, which is good. And yes, you're right. We know that people who are vaccinated still have a chance to be infected and to be a carrier. Yeah. The question is a little bit how many days. No one can really answer that. I think it halves your chance of being able to be infected and transmitting the disease. It means obviously you don't have a severe disease anymore, but you can still be spreading the virus. And how it is, I mean, we have now thousands of people screened. They first have to go to the test center to do an antigen test. They take a sample there as well. So because we wanted to obviously have samples which the dogs can sniff at, so we can compare. And we took a PCR sample, right? Quite a bit of stuff to do. And then when they obviously come in the evenings, they get another sample taken. So we just take a sample from your arm, from your armpit, and that's it. And it's not a big thing.
Probably also quite popular if people know what it is about, and that, I mean, it's always so when dogs are about. I see that also so often on the airport, if they have sort of drug or
Exactly.
explosive detecting dogs, still having the dog around sort of reduces, especially sort of these sniffer dogs, not the German Shepherd who is snarling at you, but sort of the sniffer dogs, sort of gives it all quite a, what should I say, amicable atmosphere.
100%. And as always, you are spot on. And to be very honest, two things to that. We asked people before we did this whole trial, and 97% of the people said they would think the dog would be a great idea. And the other thing is that they even trusted the dog more than the PCR, which is I think is phenomenal. And you're totally right. One of the things which I learned doing this study, which I totally did not appreciate, but the people who came to the concerts are really proud to take part in a study to make a difference. And I'm not sure if the governments really understand this phenomenon, but I think involving the population more in this whole process would have definitely got a lot more support for some of the hard facts they had to create by the lockdowns, right? But it was really an amazing thing, because we did pull out obviously some individuals, and they were all okay. They knew there was a study. They were actually fine with it. And when you asked the people, they all thought it was great. It was a great experience. They absolutely loved it. And they had to go obviously to a test center. They had to get samples taken. We asked them about their medical history. Obviously, all after data protection, can't do it differently in Germany anyway. And it was great. And I hope that politicians involve people more and don't alienate them, but involving them rather than making them part of the solution rather than making part of the problem. No.
And so how any information around already about the results? Sort
Yeah,
of,
to be honest,
how well did it work? And did they find people who
yeah.
were positive?
So because we had such a high vaccination rate until now, we they didn't find anyone who was infected. Saying this, we had obviously samples from inactivated samples, which we presented them on a random way. Everyone was blinded, and they detect them. I can't 100% say because I don't know the results from last time, but the first 3 there was 100% detection rate. It was unbelievable. So our
get
internal control worked perfectly.
the PCR tests? Did they yield anybody positive sort of at these events?
No.
So I mean, then the dogs can't be blamed if the
No,
PCRs are negative.
exactly. And and to be honest, we had we had a couple of folks which we pulled out, but and we're talking about 3, hey, and the PCR had some possible false positive results. They had some curves, and we had antigen tests which were false positive. So any test system you use obviously has its flaws. So yes, the PCR is the golden test, but it's obviously still has some limitations, right? So yeah.
So I mean, considering that this is a viable route to take, so how could the future look like? Sort of events, sort of that more of these dogs are now trained, that sort of we go more over to sort of screening sort of people, more sort of large numbers of people rather than testing. You just have the dog on standby, let them go single file sort of through it, and that's it, rather than testing. That would be the idea, yeah.
I mean, I personally think it would give another safety layer to any big events. They are definitely cheaper than any other test system which is out there. I mean, we train now obviously quite a few dogs because because it was a research project, but you could people talk about 50 cents to €1 per sample. It depends on the setup, how many you screen. As more you screen, as cheaper it becomes. When we had entries of in 1.5 hours 1,000 people, that was not a problem. Yes, if you have a football stadium of 50,000, you would obviously it's a different scale, but you could either do it in a way that you say, I only do the unvaccinated ones and I screen them. There's different scenarios. I think you can apply this. I don't know how the politics is across Europe, so people who are listening to this chat, I definitely know in Germany at the moment there's a very big push to the vaccinated or people who recovered from SARS-CoV-2 infection. It's going away a little bit from the testing strategy because I guess we all know they want to increase the number of people getting vaccinated. But I'm not sure. I can see that. I mean, we got a lot of money for this study, but to be very honest, half of that money was for the PCR because they are so expensive.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, and in the end of the day, did you get some free concert tickets out of it?
Yeah, if you think about when you get up and think about you do your research and you are a scientist, I would have never thought I would throw a couple of concerts. And we had Fury in the slaughterhouse.
Our mutual friend Dennis Novak, he would have made sure that first he would have checked what sort of music are we talking about and what sort of concert tickets there are. So that would have been a very, very important point with this.
Yeah, we actually, our plan was a little bit to start with the more seasoned population and then go to younger. So we had Fury in the Slaughterhouse as the first, which was great for Hanover because obviously, you know, they originated from Hanover, and
Yep.
and then a German singer, Bosse, and he did a great show. And it was a really nice atmosphere. People were really excited to be there. It was a lovely evening. And then we moved inside. So we first did the two outside, then we moved inside, and we had some people might know it, but not, called Alle Farben. He's like a DJ and does a fantastic show, a really great show with, you know, fire and graffiti, and it was really good. It was and people were dancing and really happy. It was just a pleasure to see people relax, you know. I did not realize how much we need this social interaction and the relaxation. And then we have had Sido, you know, a German rapper. So we really tried to pick different types of audiences. Yeah, and now it's crunching numbers and see what we get. But it was definitely an interesting thing, and I you know, and I didn't appreciate how many people are involved to get an artist on stage. You know about obviously some people there, but there's a lot of people involved, and all these people had no money in this, you know, in the COVID times. It's, you know, because you always think that, yeah, okay, you know, we have a rock star and my gosh, they have so much money, they probably don't know how to spend it. But it's not those guys. It's the guy who, you know, who built up the racks, who built up all the stuff in the backgrounds, and they had no job. So yeah, it was a nice ride, and I do have to say, I do hope that people take it on. Our dog training and stuff has been, you know, some countries have adopted it. There are now some dogs in use in Africa, in Kigali, in Rwanda. And I do think that that's probably also an area where people are more likely to be able to use them, because they're more difficult access to antigen tests or PCRs and resources, because we're living in a very rich country,
definitely.
You know.
Also, yeah.
And we'll see, you know. I personally think what has happened, I mean, you made in the beginning about the One Health idea that you know, we normally copy what has happened in human medicine. I always make the joke that thanks to humans, our guinea pigs, we know what to use in dogs. But you know, the other thing is the UK, and I'm really sorry, guys, but you know, the UK was always for us in Germany. We always look what happening there, and when they loosen something, then we obviously read their studies of infection or not, and then we change our behavior, right? And then that has been, you know, and they just let it go at the moment, and we are all waiting for the big bang to happen there. But it looks like Germany is now following track. Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting experience we all have been part of, hey. But what I can tell you is, I think next time I hope the politicians will involve the public more, because it was so great. People, they were happy, they felt proud to be part of the study. It was really great experience in my career, one of a lifetime.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much for taking us sort of on a whole journey through this amazing story, and also to give us an idea of the complexity of the whole thing. It's just, I mean, you just scratched the surface, and I mean, there must have been just so many headaches on the way leading up to it, but it came up with a really great result, and it certainly puts our profession in a very, very good light. And I mean, that is just so important. So thank you very much, Holger Volk, for joining us for this episode for Fikava Vet Chat. If someone would like to comment on this episode or would have good ideas for future Fikava Vet Chats, please email us on vetchat@fikava.org or use our social media outlets with comments. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope to see you all soon again, or give you an opportunity to listen to us very soon for another episode of Fikava Vet Chat. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.